On today, Ryan Roberts on for his annual draft discussion. Should the Miami Dolphins take a late round or UDFA flyer on Tua Tagovailoa's brother? Are smoke screens being set up around Xavier Worthy and Jatavian Sounders for, I don't know, maybe Adonai Mitchell, as well as Byron Murphy? Could he be there at 21? Plus, we'll talk about the offensive line, the edge class, weapons for the Dolphins, and so much more. Do me the favor, smash the like button, subscribe if you're new. Let's get into this.
Touchdown! You have got to be kidding me. Jalen Waddle has a Dolphin touchdown. And he will score. Field down the near side, that open. Touchdown. The run from Tua Tagovailoa. Touchdown. He's going deep. He's got it for a touchdown.
Beautiful day to be a Dolphin fan. Let's go! What's good, Fin Nation? What's good? It's your boy Reason. We're back here for another one. And today I'm joined by the great Ryan Roberts, and we are going to discuss everything under the sun regarding the Miami Dolphins and the NFL draft. Ryan, we're only a couple days away from the draft opening up. I mean, you're probably already on to the 2025 class. How you feeling in 2 days away and all your work basically starts to come to fruition?
I mean, it feels great, man. I mean, you're right. About 2 weeks ago, I turned the page to 2025. I always say, dude, you have to be like a degenerate and a sicko a little bit to be in the NFL draft space, because it's just like it really is like the ultimate grinding space, right? Because it's kind of hard for one to make a living in the industry on the NFL draft side of things, right? So like you just have to grind through, man, and like it really doesn't stop. I mean, I'm already evaluating players, getting ready for summer scouting, the transfer portal chaos that we're working through right now as well with the spring period opening up. I mean, the work really never stops. But for like the 2024 class, this is my favorite time of the year because, I mean, I know you deal with it, obviously covering the Dolphins, but it's smokescreen season, it's rumor mill season, who's going where, who's falling, who's rising. It really is a great time of the year. I love draft week, man, and appreciate you've had me on. As you know, my dad is a big Dolphins fan. I always love coming on your show.
Yeah, I remember a couple years ago when you're on the draft panel and Richmond was on it and your dad came up and talked to him and stuff. That was pretty cool too.
Yeah, man.
Let me ask you this before we get into Dolphin specific stuff. Who would you consider your guys of this draft?
Man, I feel like it might be an easier one to ask me like a position, right? Like, I mean, I feel like I have a guy in every spot. I mean, the guy that I keep coming back to, I always think of like my guys as players that I might be higher on than kind of what the consensus is or what a lot of people believe. And I think a couple guys that pop into my mind are one, I love Tyrese Knight, the linebacker out of UTEP. That's like my mid-round linebacker this year, where it's just like, haven't heard a ton of people talking about him, but I hear a lot of people kind of hyper focusing on some of the bigger names at linebackers that I honestly just don't think are that good, to be honest, right? And then Tyrese Knight, I'm watching from UTEP, where I'm just like, that guy's going to be a starting linebacker in the NFL, and he reminds me a lot of Drake Greenlaw. Like, there's a lot of layers to his game that remind me of him. I like Washington State safety Jaden Hicks a lot as a kind of a big, short zone, strong safety type, cover three heavy system that can kind of let him come down and play the alley and do those types of things. I mean, he's a tremendous football player. And I mean, honestly, ask me a position, I give you a guy. It's kind of that deep this year, man. A lot of great players in this class.
All right, so let's hop into it with the Miami Dolphins. Now, where I wanted to start it off was at 21 here. Over the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of talk with Xavier Worthy at 21. Also, well, I guess we could stick with Texas here for a sec. There's also been a lot of talk with Jatavian Sanders at 55. Tony Pauline's really had us linked to him. 2 of his first 3 mocks, he had us taking Jatavian Sanders at 21, which is way too high for my liking. Let's start off with wide receiver class, though. At 21, the Dolphins, they've been linked to Odell Beckham Jr. They've been linked to Tyler Boyd, who are still out on the free agent market. It basically seems like they've kind of halted on that and they're letting the draft play out. They're clearly looking for another weapon to add to that room, because once you get past Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, you're talking like Braxton Berrios. They're hoping Eric is a comic can turn into something. Like, those are the names you start getting into, like River Craycraft. First question is, do you think the top three, being Odunze, Harrison Jr., as well as Neighbors, plus Brian Thomas Jr., are going to be off the board at 21, given I saw recently over the last couple of days that medicals are an issue for Brian Thomas Jr. right now. Do you think that's enough to slide him down to 21? Because I don't know if a guy like Brock Bowers or Brian Thomas Jr. would get past the Bengals at 18, who obviously, might be losing T. Higgins and lost Tyler Boyd. And what are your thoughts? Is there any chance Brian Thomas is there at 21?
I think it's very unlikely, Reason. I really do. I mean, because we know where the top three receivers are basically going, right? I mean, it's going to be Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, and Roman Dunze are probably going to be in the top 9 picks. You kind of circled the Chicago Bears at number 9 as one that is probably the third most likely spot. But before that, you have the Cardinals, you have the Giants. Like, there's wide receiver needy teams before them. So I think that you're going to get 3 wide receivers in the top 9. Brian Thomas Jr. is like, he's after the top 3 bucket that we kind of associated as the top 3 in this class. Brian Thomas Jr. is my favorite. I think that kid.
I don't know what happened there. Oh, there you go. You're good. Welcome back. I guess we're having audio issues here.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Maybe. Yeah, I can hear you. I
can't hear you. I'm going to have to go out and come back in. I can't hear you.
Okay. No worries. Come back and go out and come back. So as we wait for Ryan to go out and come back in, we're having audio issues. Hope everyone is having a fantastic Tuesday. We will sit here. We'll wait for him to come on back. If you have any questions, put them in the chat. And if we have time later on in the show, as we, get there, and we, I will ask him any questions you guys might have regarding the draft. Appreciate all you coming through. Please do me the favor, smash the like button, subscribe if you're new. Shout out to Brad Martin. He got the hat. You know what time it is, buddy. If you haven't had a chance, Patreons and channel members, go check the latest update. I had an episode of 3 takes, and it covered a lot of draft nuggets and tidbits. Also, the write-up for all of you on YouTube is there for you guys to take a look at. So go check that one out as well. All right. You good to go?
I think I'm back.
Can you hear me?
Hopefully.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
All right. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Yeah. So, talking about Brian Thomas. That's what I was hitting on, I think.
Yeah. You're talking about Brian Thomas Jr.
So, I mean, with the idea that the 3 receivers are going to be off most likely in the top 9 picks, top 10 picks, somewhere in that ballpark, I think that Brian Thomas Jr. is the one that I kind of circle as the guy that I think has all the necessary traits and athleticism and length to become a dynamic outside receiver on the next level. I mean, the kid's a 4.34 athlete, 6'3 plus, long arms. And although he only had 1 real year of production, he's super young. He's super young. You hear kind of some rumors, and this is more like kind of behind the scenes of being a little bit like basical and maybe, just kind of need to kind of have hard coaching at times. Like, that's kind of the conversation with Brian Thomas Jr. But man, if everything hits, I think that he has the potential to be a superstar. So to answer the question, kind of long-winded and some technical issues off there, I don't think he's going to be there at 21. I know that you're talking obviously about, it's just medical check stuff, some durability stuff, but I think that 17 to the Jacksonville Jaguars is probably the end of any potential slide for Brian Thomas Jr. I think that they're going to value someone like him potentially very high.
Where do you see the receiver class once you get out of the top 4? Because my 5th guy, I think I'm higher on him than a lot of people, is Xavier Legette. And I think like what he could do in this offense is just, I think that's what they need, that big bodied guy. I always tell people when we're talking about Xavier Worthy, they get caught up in 4.21 speed, and I'm like, he's 165 pounds. Okay, he better run 4.21. I mean, I look at Xavier Legette, 221 pounds and runs a 4.39. I mean, what's more intimidating to the second level defenders and the secondary coming downhill on them, Xavier Legette or Xavier Worthy? What are your thoughts on the class once you get outside those top 4?
I mean, it's incredibly deep. I mean, you obviously hit on a couple of the guys that are kind of viewed in like, a next tier type of player, right? I mean, I think it's really going to come down to what your flavor is in this class. Do you need the tall outside separator like an AD Mitchell at Texas? Do you want a yak machine that you're kind of talking about with a Xavier Legette who can also play into the boundary a little bit? Do you want a pure yak guy and a Malachi Corley somewhere on day 2 out of Western Kentucky? Like, I mean, it really depends on what your flavor is at that point. I am not certain. And then there's even the Lad McConkeys, there's Jalen Polks, there's a Jalen McMillans. I mean, like, this class is deep, man. It's super deep. I think it's really going to come down to, and if Miami's in play for, I don't buy wide receiver as a play for 21 for Miami personally, but like after that, there are obviously a lot of wide receiver needy teams, including a division rival of you guys in the Buffalo Bills at 28 that like desperately need a wide receiver at this point. But it's going to come down to, again, what is your flavor? Do you need a true X that can play outside the numbers, that can win vertically? Do you want a guy like a Lad McConkey who's a little bit more of a Z slot type that can kind of, win in multiple ways? Do you want a guy that's a pure yak guy like a Malachi Corley? Do you want a Xavier Legette who is still raw fundamentally wide receiver position, but like you said, he's explosive, he's fast, and he's strong, and he could do things after the catch? It's really about your flavor, man. I mean, and my flavor is I kind of really do value the outside separators because I think they're rarer to find in most classes, right? Like it's great when Malachi can do coming out of Western Kentucky as a yak guy. And honestly, for the Dolphins, would probably be a great fit with how much you guys value, winning after the catch and trying to, manipulate space a ton. But for me, it's harder to find the outside receivers with length and explosiveness that can uncover vertically. Those guys, I think, are a little bit more rarer of a bunch.
So who do you have there after the top 4? Who would you fit that class for you?
Man, so after 4, I would have AD Mitchell from Texas, but I'm terrified of him, to be honest. Like, this is where this evaluation process is so weird, reason, because like I watch AD Mitchell from Texas and I'm like, everything's there, man. He's 6'2 plus, he's got long arms, he's 4.3 speed, he had some production in certain games, but there just seems to be something missing there. Like, why wasn't he consistently dominant every single week? Why wasn't he a more consistent football player? I would still bet on the traits, but ultimately he is a little bit of a boomer bust player. I mean, and then after that, I'm kind of going to a little bit more of the high floor. Like, I like Lad McConkey in this class a lot from Georgia. He's just going to be good, man. Like, is he going to be great? Yeah. I mean, is he good? But like, here's the conversation about Lad. Is he going to be special? Probably not. But is he going to be good? Yeah, absolutely. Like, I would be shocked that kid wasn't at least a good wide receiver in the NFL. He brings the floor compared to what the ceiling is with a guy like AD Mitchell in comparison.
Now, you said you hadn't really heard a ton regarding the Dolphins and a receiver behind the scenes, and I'm going to throw a wink out to everyone that I've been suggesting that that's potentially a smokescreen. One position I'm sure you've heard a lot about is the Dolphins and edge. Now, we can probably both agree that Dallas Turner is going to be the first guy off the board. Then after that, it turns into a crapshoot. Is Jared Verse going to be there at 21? Also, Latu. I think if there wasn't medicals, I think he's the edge 1. He still is my edge 1 because I'm not here to evaluate someone's medical sheet, and out of that I don't own. I'm here to evaluate the talent, right? And I have Latu as my edge 1. Another guy I'm super high on, but I understand the rawness, but the ceiling is just, oh my God, is Chop. I'm pretty high on Chop. What are your thoughts on 21? Because it seems like Jared Verse or Latu are the best, most realistic options. Do you see them getting there?
I think one will possibly be there. Yeah. I think the question is who's the second one, and you already talked about it. It seems, again, it's smokescreen season, so everyone's saying a bunch of different things, right? But the one thing I do buy is that Dallas Turner is probably going to be the first edge off the board. Now the question is, though, we always talk about where do the runs start in draft? Where do the runs start? If the run starts at 8, if the Atlanta Falcons draft Dallas Turner, let's say, then it becomes a little bit hairy if there's going to be a top edge rusher on the board at 21. But if they don't draft him at 8, let's say in hypothetically speaking, Atlanta drafts Adonai Mitchell out of Toledo as the first defensive player at pick 8, then the edge board starts to slide a little bit, right? I mean, obviously there's the New Orleans Saints is 14, Indianapolis Colts at 15 that are probably going to be in the edge market, but it only takes one team to pass on an edge for that board to start eking down towards you a little bit. So out of those two, Jared Verse and Laiatu Latu, I would say that Latu's more likely to be there at 21 than Verse, just because of the medical questions of Latu. Like, that's the biggest thing. And I agree with you. I mean, we were literally talking before we started, right? I'm not a doctor. I have no idea what the medicals are for Latu, but I have heard some teams are good with it. Some teams aren't. And you mentioned, before the show, like Miami was okay with Jalen Phillips a couple years ago after he had to medically retire from concussions early in his career. So are they okay with, taking a little bit of a medical, wild card on a guy like Latu? It's possible, right? I don't know that reality and what Greer is deciding to do necessarily with the scouting staff, but I do think that Latu has a chance to be there at 21. And if you can predict to me that he will not have any medical setbacks over the next few years, and he's just going to be himself that we've seen at UCL the last 2 years, then he's the most NFL-ready pass rusher of a bunch, right? Like, nobody has the nuance like he does. Nobody has the hands. Nobody has the pass rush plan. Verse is more explosive. Dallas Turner is more flexible and bendy. Like, they have those traits over him. Who has requisite levels across the board athletically, and he knows how to pass rush on the NFL level. Like, he is just going to be a guy. Someone asked me recently on the podcast like, who's the most likely edge in 2024 of the rookies to be a 10+ sack guy? And Latu's the answer. Like, he's the answer, right? Like, there's a couple guys that might have higher upside than him, but he's the most NFL ready guy year one that can come in and help a pass rush, which I know obviously with Miami dealing with some injuries on the edge this past season, that's obviously something that might be needed for them.
Yeah, because I mean, the word is Chubb's not going to probably be ready to go to the beginning of the season, and we have the out in the contract in 2025, so we can get out of that next year if he's not the same. How do you see edge after those top 3 guys? Like, what's your top 5? How do you round out the next 2 of that top 5?
So I really value the nuance of playing the position as we kind of get further down in the draft, because the guys that are freaks are going to go early, right? I mean, you could even throw like Chop Robinson. Like, I actually do have hesitation about Chop, but Chop's going to go in the first round because he's a historical athlete. Like, someone's going to draft him, and they're going to draft him now, right? But I really do like guys like Braylon Trice in this class out of Washington. He might not be the sexy athlete that a couple of these guys are, but he's similar to Latu in the sense of, like, I know that he's going to come into the NFL and he's going to rush the passer. Like, he understands hand discipline. He understands the new playing the position. He has a plan, full throttle to be able to win. I'll give you a deep sleeper, not rounding out of a top 5, but a guy that if you can get him on late day 2 or early day 3 that I am enamored with is Jalix Hunt out of Houston Christian. That's my guy this year, man. I should have let him off on this podcast of saying my guys at the beginning. That's Jalix Hunt, man. Reason, almost 6'4", 254 pounds, 34+ inch arms. He also ran 4.64 at the combine, had almost a 40-inch actually 37.5-inch vert, really good broad. Short areas, was explosive as heck. Former walk-on Cornell safety that transitioned to edge, has only been playing the position 2 years, man. That kid, if developed properly, if you trust your defensive line coach and you can be patient with him, maybe let him just be a designated pass rusher year 1, by year 2, year 3, you could be getting stud potentially. Now, he's a little bit of a high ceiling, low floor kid just because he hasn't been playing the position that long, and there's still some nuance and some strength that needs to get added to him. But Jalix Hunt out of Houston Christian, man, if you can get him in like the 3rd, the 4th round, I think long-term there's huge dividends potentially with that kid.
You gave me someone to watch because I actually didn't watch him.
He's a good player, man. I'm telling you, he's a good player. It's hilarious too, dude, because they like The Houston is like, you know what you're going to do for our defense? Everything. So we're going to put you at linebacker sometimes. We're going to rush you off the edge. We're going to put you out in space. Like, they asked him to do a little bit of everything, man. It's hilarious because guys as big as he is should not be able to move quite well as Jaleel Hunt does.
What do you think about Marshawn Nealand and Jonah Ellis?
I think that Marshawn Nealand is similar-ish to what you're trying to get out of Jared Verse, as far as he is a pure speed to power dude that is just, when he gets under your pads and he gets inside your frame, he's hard to handle, right? I worry about those guys sometimes when projecting the NFL, though, because I've learned over the last few years, especially, that like the ability to win outside track is so important on the edge, right? And I don't know, because the way I look at it is this. We mentioned the top 3 guys earlier. Dallas Turner can win the outside track because he's super bendy, right? He is very flexible. Jared Verse can win it because his first step is lightning. Like, out of his stance, he can make you overset because he is so explosive. Latu can win both with good enough bend, but also the nuance to be able to turn the corner. Marshawn Nealand's kind of, he's a one-track rusher right now, pure power, which nothing wrong with it, right? Like, he can set from edge, he can be physical, he can play with a lot of great effort. Like, that stuff's all good. I just worry about that kid necessarily becoming a high volume sack guy on the next level, because I just don't know if he's ever going to threaten outside track enough to make his power and his inside counters as lethal as they possibly can. But I like him as a guy that, at least on early downs, can set an edge, be physical, and can play with great effort. That's awesome. He's got great power to work with. But I think there are some limitations. Now, for Jonah Ellis, the opposite. Lightly built, stand-up rusher, super nuanced, decently bendy, but man, that kid is a technician. He's probably maybe the second best technician behind Latu. Like, he plays with great hands, and it's a really fun backstory because there's going to be, so his father's Luther Ellis, that played in the NFL, was actually the defensive line coach at Idaho, and then now is the defensive line coach at Utah. So he coached 2 of his brothers, Christian and Noah Ellis, at Idaho. Noah was a big nose tackle, like 360 pounds. I think he's still kicking around a couple practice squads. Christian Ellis was with the Eagles. I forget where he is. And then Caden Ellis was the other brother that plays for the New Orleans Saints as kind of like a designated pass rusher, second level defender. So there's soon going to be 4 Ellis brothers in the NFL when Ellis gets drafted in a few days.
Wow. Okay, let's shift there, but stick with the defensive line. Defensive tackle is another need where, we got Zach Sealer, but instead they've rotated in. They've signed a bunch of rotational pieces, from Benito Jones to, bringing back Deshaun Hand. We also need, someone to step in for Raekwon Davis, who's leaving as well. A guy that I've, been really high on, Johnny Newton. I don't think Byron Murphy drops to the Miami Dolphins at 21. What's your take on the defensive tackle class? I think another guy who can play from 3 tech out to that edge is a guy like Darius Robinson too. And you look at Anthony Weaver coming from that Baltimore background. Darius Robinson kind of screams a little bit of what the Ravens would like. What are your thoughts on those guys potentially at 21?
So, I mean, if Johnny Newton's there at 21, you can tell me for 100% that he's just locked in and just ready to play ball, like I'm in, right? Like, I'm in. Jerzon Newton he's about as easy as an eval as you're going to get on the defensive line this year, as far as interior defensive linemen. Look, he's a little bit of an outlier as far as he's sub 6'2". He's just got 32-inch arms. He's not the lengthiest interior defensive lineman that you've ever seen. He doesn't necessarily fit the prototype, but kid's film is just really good. I mean, and he's incredibly flexible. He was a kid that there was a rep against Minnesota this year where they slanted him from, I think it was either a 4-4-I, but they slanted him all the way outside to work against an offensive tackle's shoulder. And he won outside track, and he just bent the corner and ran down the quarterback. And it was just like, it's very unnatural for a 300-pounder. Right? Like, they just don't do that often, right? So I think that Jerzon is a very rare player in terms of flexibility, really good athlete. He's a slippery rusher. He gets off of blocks really well. I think that he's just going to be solid in the run game. I don't necessarily see like high impact in the run game, except for some tackle for loss numbers that he's probably going to be able to put up. But man, the kid's just really good. He's really good. And again, everything's good off the field. Everything's good, and his mind's right, and he's ready to go. I think it's a slam dunk pick at 21 because I think he's probably a top 15 player in this class. So tremendous value there.
Are you high on Darius Robinson?
I've been so back and forth with Darius Robinson. I've been mocking him at the end of the first round in my last couple mocks. Just for one, I think he's probably going to go there potentially for one. But then,
yeah,
I see the vision, right? I see it. He is 6'5 plus, 34 plus inch arms, strong base sense. But the weird thing about him is 2022, he played a lot more inside for Missouri, and he wasn't great in 2022. 2023, they used him a lot more on the edge, and he was a lot more dominant. Like he was, he looked more comfortable. And so he's explosive. He's long. I think that he's a guy that's going to play strong side base end in a 4-3 system. And then on obvious passing situations, you're going to reduce him down a little bit and let him rush against guards a lot or centers at a time. I think that's kind of a movable chess piece. I like what you said about Weaver and obviously his Baltimore background, because remind you of a lot of the guys that they've had there. I mean, think of, he's not quite the same body type, but Calais Campbell, like that's kind of a similar person that he's going to kind of replicate a little bit. But I'll say this, the one urge I would have about Darius Robinson, and if it's in Miami's case, because I don't really know enough about Anthony Weaver as a defensive mind other than what he played in the NFL, right? But if Anthony Weaver drafts him, whoever drafts him, forget about Anthony Weaver, anyone that drafts Darius Robinson, they have to have a creative plan intact, right? Like I don't want them to just draft Darius Robinson and just play him at one spot and then that's it for the rest of his career. I think that's going to deter his impact. I think that you need to say, this kid might be a base end early downs, but I need to reduce him down. I need to move him around. He's kind of a movable chess piece. And if you use that way, I think you get a lot of production out of him.
Yeah, and Weaver's, they ran a lot of 3 high safety shells. He likes players to be multiple, you know what I mean, on the defensive front all the way back to the secondary, which brings me to another player before we get to the offensive side again here. I'm high on this kid. I had him as my safety 1, right? I also have him as one of the top corners in the draft, but I think he converts just because he's a little stiff, from the waist down. Cooper Dejean. Do you see him going in the first round? I told you we want to use a ton of 3 safety shells. You see a guy like that. Listen, I don't know if there's a better guy to fit the star role in a defense coming out of this draft, from the perch to the box to the slot to the boundary. What are your thoughts on Cooper Dejean? Because we all know Greer loves his cornerbacks. What are your thoughts on Cooper Dejean? Is 21 a little rich for you? And do you see him getting out of the first?
Reason we finally have a white cornerback and you want to move him to safety. Come on, man. Come on. I'm just kidding, obviously. I agree with your assessment, though, right? I think there's some teams that view him as an outside corner because they're more zone-based and they're more, he's going to play with his eyes back towards the line of scrimmage. You're not going to ask him to turn and run and make coverage a ton, right? And pressing and doing that type of stuff. But then there's other teams that are for sure going to see him in a similar star role, a guy that can play nickel, a guy that can tuck back, can play safety, a guy that can do a little bit of everything. He's a rare player, man. And not a rare player from a grade perspective, because he's not one of the top 10 players in this class or anything like that. Like, he's not a blue chipper, in my opinion. But he's a rare player because you just don't see a lot of him come around. Guys legitimately play 3 to 4 spots in a secondary. Like, that's unique, man. That's super unique. So I'm in on Cooper Dejean. I think he's a very good athlete. I think he's incredibly proactive as a player as well. I think he sees the game at a high level, super physical, one of the best tacklers in this class overall. Like, forget about just corner. He can tackle, man. So as a movable chess piece, I think that kid has all the goods. And I think in today's game, it matters so much more. I mean, because teams are trying to spread you out so much now and try to create mismatches. Having guys that can move anywhere in a secondary is so valuable. I mean, we are far gone from the NFL where a strong safety was a strong safety and they can't do anything else and they're just going to play in the box and they're going to play in the alley. Like, you can't just live like that anymore. You can't, man, because people are going to get you in coverage at some point. I think Cooper Dejean has tremendous upside. So it sounds like the medicals are all checked. He had his pro day late this year, obviously, coming back from the injury down the stretch of the season. Yeah. I'm in on him. First round pick, in my opinion. I think that he is a tremendous football player and one of the better all around players in this class.
Yeah, I agree. Let's shift to the offense here, and I think they're going edge or offensive tackle. My first question for you is, okay, I see a world where someone takes Penix in the top 20 and 5 quarterbacks go in the top 20, as crazy as that is. Do you really see a world where, okay, that's 5 off the board in the top 20, right? Okay, so now we got 15 picks. Do you really see a world with those other 15 picks in the top 20? 5 of those are spent on Joe Alt, Olufashnu, Troy Fautanu, Talise Fuaga, and JC Latham?
Man, it's a tough question. I think that offensive lineman needy teams, right, is in the top 10. And I mean, most teams are offensive lineman needy because there's not enough good offensive linemen in the world. Like, it just is.
Yeah.
But New York Giants are a team. Los Angeles Chargers are a team. Obviously, the Tennessee Titans are a team that need offensive tackles badly. New Orleans Saints are a team that desperately need offensive tackles. I think that there's going to be a high run in offensive tackles. Now, the question to answer your question fully is, when does the run start, right? Because this is the way I look at it.
Yeah.
Los Angeles Chargers are the biggest wild card of this offensive line board. Do they start the run at 5? Because if they start the run at 5, then the New York Giants at 6, like, maybe you're like, oh man, they start the run. They need to figure this out. And then the Tennessee Titans are for sure to get an offensive tackle. It's like the worst kept secret in the NFL right now is that the Tennessee Titans are going to take an offensive tackle. There's no doubt. The New Orleans Saints, Trevor Penning, not good so far. They have Ryan Ramczyk on one leg, and you don't know how long he's going to last, so you need to take an offensive tackle. So yeah, man, I expect a big run on offensive tackles. I think we're going to see the early quarterbacks. We're going to see a couple wide receivers trick. But I think it's a really deep and really good offensive line class, but I also think the top is very good. So I can see 5 to 6 in a very short span, the kind of what you're saying, because man, it's some good players on the board. Some really good players on the board.
Okay, so let's talk about a few that might be available at 21. Let's start with a guy who he's really risen since the Senior Bowl. He could play left tackle in a pinch, could play the interior for you from center to guard. What are your thoughts on Graham Barton? Are you buying into this top 25, top 30 player hype that really has been attached to him since the Senior Bowl?
I'm buying top 32 on him. Yeah. I undervalued him a little bit early, and then I kind of got a clear vision of what he is on the next level. He's not a tackle, obviously, right?
No,
full time, because he's just got too short of arms. He doesn't have arm length. Like, he doesn't have a wingspan, but the kid has center experience, although a couple years ago at this point, a few years ago at this point. But that kid has really good balance of athleticism, technical refinements, and he's got a developing power profile. And I think that he's could potentially play center at the next level. I think he definitely play guard. Funny enough, and I don't know how you feel about Connor Williams, but like, he reminds me a lot of Connor Williams coming out of Texas. Like, there's a lot of Connor Williams in his game. So, and Connor was another guy that could play guard, could play center, like, he can move around a little bit. And I think similar thing with Graham Barton. He is another kid that I don't know if his ceiling's as high as some of the other offensive linemen in this class, but the floor is very high. Like, I think people get super excited about like Jackson Powers Johnson from Oregon, and I get it, right? But his floor is not as high as Graham Barton's. His ceiling is higher, but like, Graham Barton brings a floor to the table that honestly, especially if you're putting him at center, like, I kind of want that floor, man. Like, I want to know what I'm getting every day and be a communicator and to be that guy that has a ton of experience. That's what Graham Barton has. So I've come full circle on Graham Barton, man. Initially, I was just kind of like, guys, like, I like him, but like, I don't know if I love him. Now I'm like, okay, top 32 player, probably. Like, I'm good with him being a late first round pick because I think he brings tremendous versatility and just he's a good player, man. He's just good overall.
Is Jackson Powers Johnson to you a first round pick?
Yes, I think he could be. So he's a guy that has some medical question marks, some like durability stuff around him. So he could be a faller a little bit in this class, but I do think that he could be a top 32 player because he's the upside guy, right? He's 6'3 plus, he's 309 pounds, massive, could play guard, could play center. He's got the upside, right? Like he's got a higher upside than any center. Like I like Zach Frazier a lot out of West
That's
Virginia
my
as well
guy.
as a true center in
Yeah.
this class. Love
Yeah.
him, man. Love him. I need to make sure he got him my 0.5. Like I think that he's a tremendous player, but Jackson Powers-Johnson has the highest upside of any center in this class. If he hits and he stays healthy, he's got big time upside.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, Zach Frazier is like, he's the best day one starter at the center position that you want, that you can plug and play. That's how I feel about. I'm a big Zach Frazier guy. Fell more in love with him during the process. You know what I mean? All right, tackle. Let's pivot back here to tackle for a sec. A guy that I've been telling everyone screams Chris Greer when you watch the tape. Amarius Mims. Do you think he's going to be on the board at 21? And I think this is another kid with so much upside. And like, you know, I think if he's a 2-year starter, I don't think the Dolphins would have a shot at him at 21, to be honest with you. What are your thoughts on Mims?
If Mims was like a 15-game starter and more consistent as far as playing time, he'd probably be in the conversation with all as OT1 in this class. I mean, I think that's a very safe thing to say. He has, and I think Dane Brugler said this on a podcast probably like last week or the week before, and I actually said the same thing a little beforehand. But I agree with Dane 100% because I respect Dane so much from The Athletic. But Dane said something. They said something similar to this reason. He said that if 5 years from now you look back at this class and say Amarius Mims is the top tackle in the class, would be shocked at all. And neither would I, man. I mean, they just don't make kids that look like him much. I mean, he's 6'7", 335 to 340 pounds is what he played at. He's got very long arms, 35 plus inch arms. He's got short area quickness. He's got he's got the requisite redirection skills. And then also his core strength is stupid. Like it doesn't make any sense. When he digs his heels and he gains extension, you're not going anywhere. Like it's over. The rep is over. Now that being said, he's only played 8 games, right? He's only played 8 games or started 8 games. And that's going to terrify some NFL folks. You know who hates offensive linemen with lack of experience reason? NFL offensive line coaches. They hate that, man. They are not big fans of that. Offensive linemen experience a lot projecting to the next level. Historically, it really does. But that being said, I think someone top 20 could certainly take a chance on Amarius Mims. But he is a little bit of a wild card as far as where he's projected. If you ask me, like, percentage-wise, I would say more likely I think that he's a top 20 pick. But would I be shocked if he's there at 21? No, because the lack of experience is a red flag to some folks, right? But long-term, if he could stay healthy, if he can figure it out technically, fully, kids could be an amazing player. Could be a pro-level player, all-pro level player. He's got a type of upside. If you guys want to go back and watch one of the most hysterical games of all time, 2022 against Ohio State in the playoff game with Georgia, it doesn't make any sense because Ohio State has a couple good NFL rushers in 2022. They have JT Tuimoloau. They have Zach Harrison. They have Jack Sawyer, guys that you're going to see on NFL fields. And he was toying with those kids. Like, they could not do anything against Amarius Mims in that football game. And that's as good as it can be if he stays healthy.
Yeah, the kid's an absolute beast. Where Dolphin fans are kind of pausing on him is the fact that, like I've said, he can't play guard. He's a tackle. He's a true tackle. Where they're looking at is we got Armstead for at least this year. Now, how many games is Armstead going to play? 8 to 10. So Mims will get starter reps. Do you think that's another issue for a team like us where, you only have Terron Armstead for 1 year, but is it because you can't really plug and play Mims right away? Would that give you pause at 21? Because this is how I look at it. Let's perfect example. Let's put him and Barton in the same sentence here. First of all, an offensive tackle for the potentially 10 plus years massively trumps any interior lineman you can bring to me that isn't Quentin Nelson when he was coming out of college, okay? That's the first thing I'll say.
Right.
Secondly, with a guy like Mims, that ceiling is just so high that, it's like what you said, if he would have been a 15-game starter, he's probably in the conversation with Joe Alt for for the first tackle off the board. How would you view that as a guy that you possibly can't plug and play for guaranteed 17 games in the first season? Would the upside and the evaluation just trump and the fact that you could have a tackle for the next 10 years just trump that?
It's a fascinating question because for me, as an independent scout that doesn't have a job on the line, if it flames out, I always go for upside. I always do. And full transparency when I'm evaluating players, I do value the upside more than the floor just because I have job security in what I'm doing. Like, I'm not going to lose my job if I'm wrong about it, right? So I always value upside more. I think I think the ideal scenario, honestly, is that if Miami can find someone at 21 that can plug and play inside and then maybe as a tackle long term, right? Like a Troy Fautanu out of Washington, potentially. Like, that's ideal, right? Like, that's ideal because you're kind of killing two birds with one stone at that point. But if you're asking me, would I rather have Amarius 21 that might not play 17 games, but for the 2 or 3 games that Teron Armstead's out, or if something happens to Austin Jackson or whatever, he plugs and plays where you can make him fit, or Graham Barton that's going to start at one of the interior positions early and just be a starter, I would go Amarius Mims. I just would, because I'm going to value that guy who I think is going to be an all-pro potential player over a guy who I think is going to be a good pro. Like, that's what I think Graham Barton's going to be. He's just going to be a good interior offensive lineman, but I think Mims has the upside to being a tremendous football player. So give me Mims.
Okay. Yeah, hey, I'm not I'm right there with you on all the points you just made regarding Mims and Barton. I mean, you're not going to get any pushback from me. What are your thoughts on the guard class? One guy I'm really big on is Christian Haynes out of UConn. What you got Jordan Morgan kicking inside, I'm going to assume. You fan of Cooper Beebe and Mason McCormick, Christian Mahogany, Dominic Puny? Is Troy Fautanu your number one guy at guard kicking in? What are your thoughts on the guard class? And other than Troy Fautanu, the run you think is, and Barton, do you think the run really starts on guards in the second round?
I think that's going to start technically in the first rounds, and then it's going to ascend into the second round conversation. I think some guys are going to get pushed up a little bit. I really like the guard class because I do have Fautanu as a guard. I evaluated him as a guard just because I know he has the requisite arm length, but I think that his game can last on the outside. I think he could even be a good offensive tackle, but I think he could be an all-pro guard. Like, I think he has that type of upside. He just, for me, he's an inside player more than outside on the excellent for maximizing his skill set. So I'm a big fan of Fautanu. You mentioned a couple of my favorites. I mean, Christian Haynes might be the most underrated player in this class. I feel like someone's going to draft Christian Haynes in the top 50 in the second round, and you're just going to be like, all right, you're good to go for the next X amount of years. I mean, he reminds me a lot of Shaq Mason. Shaq Mason's been a good player in the NFL for a long time. He can play guard. He can play center. He's really flexible, strong, and explosive. I like him a ton, man. So Christian Haynes is a good one. Cooper Beebe is about as easy as an evaluation as you're going to find. The ceiling is not of a Fautanu or a couple of these other guys that we're going to talk about, or even a Christian Haynes. But you know what I can depend on Cooper Beebe being in year one? He's ready to play. And he's going to come in, and he's probably going to be a starting guard pretty early in his career. He gives me like Marshall Yanda vibes, right? Where it's like, you didn't hear from Marshall Yanda for years and years and years, but then you look back and you're like, dang, Marshall Yanda was good, man. He was really good.
Yeah.
Cooper Beebe, I think, is that type of player, man. So there's plenty of guys. Mahogany, fourth round, somewhere in that ballpark. He's a value at that spot. I even think there's a couple developmental day 3 guys in rounds, like a Nathan Thomas out of Louisiana is a kid that I looked at, and I'm saying like college left tackle that probably bumps inside. You can find guards pretty much anywhere in this class. It's a really good class, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think this guard class, has some gems, man. What are your thoughts on the tight end class? Because here's where I'm at. If Brock Bowers starts this fall, I would very much so look into a potential trade up to jump in front of a team like the Bengals, because I think Brock Bowers in this offense would just be absolutely lunacy. But after that, it's, you get into the Jatavian Sanders, the Bensonots, the Theo Johnsons and such. I know when I had Dante on, he told me he was not a fan of this tight end class. Are you, are you the same way? Would you rather be like, okay, take like a late round flyer on like a Tip Ryman out of Illinois? Like, where are you at with this tight end class?
I'm going to be a little bit more honest than okay. This tight end class reeks, man. It's a bad class. Okay, it's not good. You have one elite player at the top, mental guys that you hope can be good players, and you have a couple more guys that are more high floor players. Like, that's kind of this class. After obviously Brock Bowers, you have guys like Jatavian Sanders, who I like, but there's still a little bit of a projection there, right? As a pure route runner, as a blocker, like there's still projection that needs to be happening there. Theo Johnson is pure projection. Like, you love the athletic skill set, you love the, but he never took a massive jump at Penn State. And part of that was durability. He was banged up a little bit the last couple of years. I get that stuff. But ultimately, he wasn't as productive. I mean, he's a 6'6 plus athlete at 255. Whatever reason, he was never that guy at Penn State. He was a good player. He was never a great player at Penn State. So I think there's a developmental guy like that. Jared Wiley from TCU, I think, is in a similar vein, very upside. But for me, it's all upside at this point. You need to be able to act as the talent at some point, and he just hasn't done it. But then you have Ben Sinnott, who I think is more Stover, another high floor guy, maybe not the most dynamic player of all time, but you're really taking gambles at this point in this class, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. What's your thoughts on the safety class? Tyler Nubin, I'm pretty high on. Obviously, we talked about Jaden Hicks. Javon Bullard looks like, since the moment he came in, he's looked like a playmaker in Georgia. The Dolphins have brought in Cole Bishop for a visit, as well as Kalen Bullock. I'm pretty high on Dadrian Taylor Demerson. Another kid I'm high on that I don't think enough people are talking about is Trey Taylor out of Air Force. What do you think of the safety class? Because the Miami Dolphins, they have Jordan Poyer on a 1-year deal. Javon Holland is in the 4th year of his deal. He does not have the 5th-year option because he was a 2nd-round pick. And then our only backup behind them is Elijah Campbell.
Yeah. Well, I think the safety class was one that there's a lot more quality than I once thought there was. I think Jaden Hicks from Washington State is one of my more favorites in the class. I would take him in the top 64. I think that he's got tremendous upside. Cameron Kitchens as a single high free safety. I know he didn't test exceptionally well out of Miami, but I think he's got some of the best range in this class overall. Now he needs to get better with angle in the run game and consistently finishing through contact in the run game, but he's definitely a very talented player. I mean, Taylor, who you just mentioned at Air Force, was actually down at the College Gridiron Showcase, which I scouted initially, and he's a very interesting player who quietly won the Jim Thorpe Award this year, and no one really talked about it too much. And yeah, so I think the safety class has value throughout the class. There might not be a guy that's a super going the first. Sorry about the audio. Probably my audio is a little messed up right now.
It's been like that pretty much the whole show. It's been skipping and jumping and stuff like that. So it's all good. Man. So based on what you've heard, what do you think the Dolphins do at 21? You think they go offensive line?
Yeah, I think it's offensive tackle or edge. 2 spots. I think it's best edge available, or they take advantage of the offensive line. So I think those are the 2 spots that make the most sense, and for the short term and the long term for Miami.
And another question I had for you. First of all, how do you see the quarterback? How do you see this falling? Because I know that there's the Drake May and Jalen Daniels discourse right now. A lot of talk that the Vikings, the whole JJ thing was a smokescreen, and they really want Drake May. And how do you feel about the Dolphins? I mean, we got Mike White and Skylar Thompson taking a 7th round or a UDFA flyer on a guy like Taulia.
Yeah, I mean, the quarterback conversation has been kind of exhausting, to be honest. Like, it hasn't been the most enjoyable conversation this draft season, but I think that it is going this way. Caleb Williams is going to the Bears. We've known that for several weeks, if not months at this. After that, I still buy that Jane Daniels over JJ McCarthy recently. Apparently, the betting favorite is going in his favor or something recently, but I really don't buy into that. Things flip so often, and even draft morning, you'll see things flip in that. So I think Jane Daniels, New England takes a quarterback necessarily. I think that they might actually trade back from 3 is kind of my pulse that I get out of just kind of the draft landscape.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is it Minnesota? Is it Las Vegas Raiders? Do Denver Broncos move up to 3? We'll see what the conversation happens of who's the most sense logistically. But we'll see as far as that goes. But I think it's going to be Drake May, JJ McCarthy. And then I'm not necessarily sold that it's going to be a 5th quarterback in the first rounds. I think that someone could take Penix as a quarterback needy team. I think someone could take Bo Nix out of for a quarterback needy team, but I don't necessarily think it's a foregone conclusion. I mean, we'll see if I'm right or wrong about it. But after that, I mean, just kind of falls a little bit. Like, it really does. Taulia is a fun one, because he was fun. Right? Like, he's a smaller guy, only about 5'10". He never really put it all together. The funny part about him is I feel like he's kind of a guy that we got tired of hearing about because he was just kind of Maryland's starting quarterback for like the last 3 years and no one cared at some points. But he's actually a pretty talented kid. I mean, he throws a good ball. Ball comes out of his hand well. He's a good athlete, but he's super small. He makes some doofus decisions at times, right? I wouldn't say anything about it, man. You get Tyrod Taylor ability.
You think Bo Nix slides to the 2nd?
I think it's possible. I depends how needy some teams get, right? Because there's going to be a 4th quarterback taken in the top 10. Whether if it's Minnesota that goes up, Denver just traded for Zach Wilson. Like, are you going to tell me that Zach Wilson's the answer for you in 2024 or Jarrett Stidham? Like, I'm not buying that for Denver, right? So could Denver get desperate and draft the Bo Nix? Possible. Could Las Vegas Raiders like a Bo Nix? It's possible. I think a 5th quarterback might get taken in the first round, and I think it'll come down to between Penix and Nix. Like, see a terrible history of injuries, like an absolute understandable player that you know more of. Bo Nix, I think it's possible. He could get picked in the first round, but I wouldn't be like overly shocked either way.
All right, man. I don't really have much more to ask you and pick your brain about regarding the draft. You go ahead, plug anything you got coming out. I know you said, you have another mock coming out too, right? So you have some stuff dropping, right? So go ahead, plug the podcast, plug where they can find you, and plug anything you have that's coming out over the next little bit.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you for having me, man. For people in chat, I'm sorry about the internet connection. I'm really not sure what's going on. It's as strong on my side, and I don't know what shares. So my apologies on that one. Anybody that wants to follow me at Rise and Draft on Twitter, I have mock drafts, team-specific ones that will be going out until the end of the draft, until the beginning of the draft. I also have a 7-round mock draft coming out soon. So Rise and Draft on Twitter, if anybody wants to go follow over there.
Appreciate you. I appreciate you coming through, man. It was a good conversation, and I hope all of y'all enjoyed it. Make sure you tune in tomorrow, guys. I will have Neil Driscoll on, and we will do our live hand-picked mock draft. We'll be doing the first 2 rounds and then tell y'all who we ended up taking in the 5th, 6th, and 7th for the Miami Dolphins. And then I'll be live Thursday and Friday for the draft. On Saturday, I'll be live after the day 3 completes, and I'll be doing a recap because Lord knows I'm not sitting through that 7-hour show on stream. My God. So, guys, do me the favor, smash the like button on the way out, subscribe if you're new, and as always, we'll see you on the next one. And until next time, fins up, guys. See you later.